Some stories begin with a shy smile, others with a piercing cry, but this one was born from a silence that seemed to carry an invisible weight. Marcos Alencar believed that, after losing his wife and becoming a widowed father at 34, he had seen it all. He was wrong. His one-year-old baby, Noah, did something no adult in the house could explain, and when he finally uttered a few words, the words were so disturbing that they took his own father's breath away. It wasn't about broken toys or ordinary nightmares. It was about something that seemed to be hiding behind a wall of the old townhouse where they lived, a mystery that mixed strange behavior, childhood trauma, and a supernatural presence no one wanted to believe existed. And, in the middle of it all, a father ready to face anything to protect his son, even what doesn't belong in this world. Brace yourself, because what you're about to read could be mistaken for a thriller, but for Marcos and Noah, it was just real life happening. A story where the line between the psychological and the paranormal blurs, and where a simple sentence, spoken from a baby's mouth, paves the way for a mystery that will chill you to the core. Noah was just 1 year old when he started doing something that, at first glance, seemed harmless. He would approach a specific wall in the room and press his little face against it, as if trying to feel its cool texture. Marcos Alencar, at first, found it amusing, a curious baby thing, he thought. But as the days went by, this behavior went from being a cute moment to a disturbing routine. It was as if that wall held an invisible magnet that drew the little one to it inexplicably. The problem was that Noah didn't do it by laughing or babbling like a baby usually does. He stood still, motionless, staring, as if paying attention to something no one else could see. There were no toys around, no loud sounds. Just a dense silence and that strange fixation. Marcos, even trying not to become paranoid, began to sense something was wrong. After all, any repetitive behavior in such a young child deserves attention. Over time, Marcos realized that no matter where Noah was, on the rug, in his crib, even on his lap, he'd crawl straight to that spot on the wall as soon as he let go. It wasn't the most colorful or brightest wall in the house, but there was something about it that seemed irresistible to the baby. And although Marcos tried to distract his son with new toys, music, and even cartoons, nothing seemed to compete with that strange attraction. Deep down, he began to wonder if it was just childish curiosity or a sign of something deeper. He didn't want to think about childhood trauma, but the frequency of the behavior and the baby's serious demeanor made everything seem darker. It was at this stage that Marcos, even without admitting it to himself, began to sense that the wall was hiding something, and that, somehow, his son already knew. Since the sudden loss of his wife, Clara, Marcos Alencar had been struggling to be both a father and a mother. As a self-employed architect, he balanced tight project deadlines with late-night bottle feedings and diaper changes between meetings. He knew raising a baby alone was challenging enough, but dealing with unusual behavior like Noah's made everything even more confusing. And to make matters worse, he had no one to share his daily anxieties with. He decided to investigate on his own. He spent nights researching possible causes online: autism, sensory disorders, even motor development issues. Nothing seemed to fit perfectly. Noah's behavior didn't include any other worrying signs, which only deepened the mystery. Marcos even considered the possibility of childhood trauma, but, being so young, where would that come from? And, more importantly, why that wall? Doubts began to steal his peace. Every time he saw his son press his little face into that corner, a tightness rose in his chest. He wondered if he was failing as a father, if there was something he wasn't noticing that could later become a bigger problem. In those moments, Clara's absence weighed more heavily than ever. It was the kind of situation in which he would give anything to hear her opinion, no matter how simple. Even so, Marcos tried to remain calm in front of Noah. After all, he didn't want his son to sense his nervousness. But deep down, he knew he needed to find an explanation, and quickly. With each passing day, that wall seemed less like a detail in the house and more like a silent character in their lives. Over time, Marcos began to notice a pattern that made his stomach churn. Noah would only press his face against the wall when he was alone. If Marcos or anyone else was nearby, the baby would play normally, babbling, and smiling. But as soon as the room became silent and empty, he would crawl to that spot, as if obeying a silent call. The situation began to take on a weight that Marcos didn't want to admit, but couldn't ignore. There was something about the atmosphere in that corner that bothered him. Even as an architect, accustomed to observing structural and aesthetic details, he couldn't find anything unusual about the construction. The wall was smooth, without leaks or cracks, and the finish was perfect. However, whenever he approached, he felt a slight chill on the back of his neck, as if he had entered a cold room, even on the warmest days. Marcos tried to convince himself it was just an illusion. After all, who hasn't felt that strange shiver for no apparent reason? But deep down, there was a persistent feeling of being watched. He even moved furniture around, put down a colorful rug, even hung a large painting in that spot, hoping to break Noah's interest. Nothing worked. The baby simply pushed away whatever was in the way and returned to his usual position. This discomfort began to grow like a shadow over the daily life of the house. Marcos began to avoid leaving Noah alone for long periods, but he also knew he couldn't watch his son 24/7. Something, in that silent wall, seemed to be waiting for the right moment to manifest itself, and that thought kept him from sleeping soundly. The early morning was silent, interrupted only by the distant sound of a car passing on the deserted street. Marcos was fast asleep when, suddenly, a high-pitched, desperate scream echoed through the house. He glanced at the clock, 2:14 a.m. His fatherly instincts overcame his sleep. Within seconds, he was in the hallway, his heart pounding like a drum. When he opened the bedroom door, he found Noah standing in his crib, but not facing the door. The baby was facing the corner where the wall met, his little face pressed against it as if trying to break through. His shoulders were shaking, and his little hands moved restlessly, scratching lightly at the paint. The sight sent a cold shiver down Marcos's spine. He ran, picked Noah up, and tried to calm him with soft words and firm hugs. But to his surprise, the baby began to struggle slightly, as if wanting to return to that corner. It wasn't a normal cry of fear, there was something almost hypnotic about his behavior, as if he were being called back to the wall. Marcos spent the rest of the night awake, holding his son in his arms, the two of them lulled by the muffled sound of the wind outside. He knew something was wrong. And in that moment, he was certain, it wasn't just in his head anymore. Some presence, invisible yet palpable, seemed to be hiding behind that patch of concrete. The next day, still shaken by the early morning incident, Marcos decided to seek professional help. He called Dr. Helena Vasquez, a child psychologist highly recommended by a longtime friend. Over the phone, he explained Noah's strange behavior and his insistence on the wall. The professional, in a calm voice, said it was important to observe the child in person and scheduled an appointment for the following week. When she arrived, Dr. Helena brought some educational toys and began interacting with Noah playfully, as if she didn't want anything. Marcos watched from afar, trying not to interfere. Everything seemed to be going normally until, in the middle of a game of fitting together, the baby dropped the pieces and crawled to the corner of the wall. Helena approached slowly, keeping her voice soft, and asked, "What's there, Noah?" It was then that the boy, with a fixed gaze and an expression far too serious for his age, murmured, "I don't want her back." Helena frowned and, with the delicacy of someone who knows how to deal with a child's world, asked, "Who is she, Noah?" The answer came in an almost imperceptible whisper, "The lady on the wall." The air in the room seemed to grow heavier, and Marcos felt his stomach churn. The psychologist ended the session early and asked to speak with Marcos alone. He said that, although children's words can be influenced by drawings, conversations, or imagination, that speech, coupled with the recurring behavior and crying in the early hours of the morning, deserved special attention. And, for the first time, Marcos felt someone shared his discomfort with this mystery. Restless after his conversation with Dr. Helena, Marcos decided to rummage through old files in hopes of finding some clue. Among forgotten folders on his computer and recordings made on his cell phone, he found a video captured by the baby monitor a few months earlier. The footage showed Noah in his crib, playing alone, until a female figure appeared in the corner of the nursery. Zooming in on the image, Marcos recognized the nanny he'd hired for a few weeks, Marion. The strange thing was that, upon seeing her approach, Noah immediately crawled to the corner of the wall, pressing his face against it as he did now. His expression wasn't one of joy or playfulness, but of silent escape, as if that were the only safe place in the room. Marcos's heart raced. He decided to investigate further and discovered, with a quick search, that Marion had used false documents to get the job. Even more disturbing, after leaving the job without explanation, she simply disappeared, leaving no address or valid phone number. There was no official record of her true identity. Watching that recording made Marcos's blood run cold. Noah's phrase, "wall lady," echoed in his mind, now connecting with that strange image. He began to realize that perhaps he was dealing with something far beyond simple childish behavior, and that the answer wouldn't come solely from doctors or psychologists. Not knowing where else to turn, Marcos decided to seek out someone who understood phenomena that traditional science couldn't explain. That's how he found Tasa Montenegro, a paranormal investigator known for dealing with cases of supernatural presence in old houses. Upon hearing the story, she showed no surprise. She simply asked to visit the mansion and experience the atmosphere for herself. During the first inspection, Tasa stood silently in the nursery for a few minutes, walking slowly and touching the walls. When she reached the corner where Noah always pressed his face, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "There's something here, a dense energy, like a portal to bad memories," she murmured. Marcos felt a shiver run down his spine. Tasa explained that he could perform a purification ritual to try to undo whatever was trapped in that part of the house. He used candles, coarse salt, and a strong incense that filled the room with a strong scent. During the process, Noah, who was in his father's arms, kept his gaze fixed on the wall, but without crying. When the ritual was finished, Tasa stated that the presence had weakened and that perhaps this was the first peaceful night in a long time. And indeed, for the first time since it all began, Noah didn't approach the corner of the wall the next day. He went back to playing around his room, smiling, and even clapping his hands. For Marcos, it was as if an invisible weight had been lifted from his home, but he knew he needed to see if this calm would last or just a brief respite from a still unsolved mystery. In the days following the ritual, Marcos felt the house breathe differently. The air, previously heavy, seemed lighter, and even the light streaming through the windows of the nursery seemed brighter. Noah played everywhere, as if the fear had been swept away along with the presence. Even the moments of nocturnal activity, previously marked by sudden cries, were now silent and peaceful. Marcos took advantage of this new phase to reorganize the room, removing unnecessary furniture and making the space more welcoming. He placed a soft rug in the corner where the wall had previously been fixed, as a symbol that this spot was now just part of a safe home. He finally felt like a widowed father who could give his son what he needed most, peace and protection. But one seemingly ordinary morning, something struck a nerve again. As he entered the room to get a blanket, he saw the phrase, "She can't come back," written in white chalk on the baseboard. The letters were childish, but Noah wasn't old enough, or coordinated enough, to write. Marcos's heart raced, and for a few seconds he stood still, staring at those words, feeling the same chill on the back of his neck as before. Despite the strangeness of the message, the atmosphere in the house remained unchanged. Noah remained happy and active, and Marcos decided not to tell anyone what had happened, at least for now. But that sentence would remain etched in his mind, a reminder that some mysteries may never be fully solved, only silenced. Noah's first birthday came as a silent milestone of victory. For Marcos, it wasn't just another candle on the cake, it was a celebration of having navigated a dark period together, where fear and uncertainty seemed to lurk around every corner. As he held his son in his arms, gazing at his curious little eyes shining with the colors and balloons, he felt a pride that was hard to describe. During this simple party, with a few close friends, Marcos made a silent promise: he would always listen to his son, even when words wouldn't come. He realized that often, what a child can't say with their mouth, they scream with their behavior. And he would never again underestimate these signs. For a widowed father, every protective gesture now carried the weight of double responsibility. After everyone left and the house fell silent, Marcos and Noah lay together on the couch, surrounded by scattered toys. The tired baby rested his head on his father's shoulder, and Marcos closed his eyes for a moment, feeling a calm he hadn't experienced in months. There was no sign of a supernatural presence, no paranormal phenomenon, just the soft sound of Noah's breathing. Even though recent memories were marked by fear and mystery, Marcos knew they had reached a point of relief. Life, like that house, could be renewed. And even if certain shadows tried to return, he was prepared. After all, he had already learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's protecting what you love, even when you don't know where the threat comes from. Some stories remind us that what's most frightening isn't always just outside the door. Sometimes, the real challenge lies within, in the courage to face what we don't understand and the determination to protect those we love, even without all the answers. Marcos discovered that listening to Noah's silence was as important as hearing his first words, and that every gesture could be a warning or a cry for help. What about you? Have you ever stopped to think about the signs life throws your way, but which, in the hustle and bustle of everyday life, go unnoticed? Maybe it's not a mysterious wall, but it could be a different look, unusual behavior, or even a prolonged silence. Small clues that, when ignored, can grow into something much bigger. The truth is that protecting those we love requires more than physical presence, it requires mindfulness, sensitivity, and a willingness to act, even when we don't know exactly what to do. It's at this point that fear ceases to be an enemy and becomes the driving force behind actions that change destinies. If this story made you think or gave you chills, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, you'll find more stories that will move your mind, touch your heart, and perhaps change the way you see the world around you. After all, the next story may be happening much closer than you think.